The dawn began its cautious crawl over Maplewood Estates, pulling a gray blanket over the modest row of Tudor-style homes that lined Maple Street. The tranquility was broken only by the soft crunch of snow underfoot as I stepped onto my driveway, shovel in hand. A light frost clung to the air, whispering reminders of winter's stubborn hold. I inhaled deeply, savoring the crispness, feeling the quietude settle around me like an old friend. This is peace, I thought, a silent acceptance of nature's whims, a simple dance of clearing paths and making way. But peace, I quickly learned, was a fragile notion here. It was a bird perched on the edge of a brittle branch, easily startled by the slightest disturbance. Karen lived 3 houses down. Her presence was as unmistakable as the perfume of lilacs she favored, a scent that seemed to linger long after she'd passed, much like her opinions. She was the self-declared guardian of the Homeowners Association rules, clutching the bylaws as if they were sacred texts, and she wielded them with a righteousness that bordered on zealous. Yesterday she'd left a note on my door, neatly typed, its corners perfectly aligned with the edges of the paper. A cordial reminder, it stated, that snow removal was to commence only after sunrise. An HOA rule, she insisted, designed to preserve the neighborhood's tranquility. I'd chuckled, letting the note flutter into the recycling bin. Tranquility, it seemed, was a selective privilege. But at 5 a.m., the world was still cloaked in pre-dawn shadows, and my shovel made swift, muted work of the powdered snow. The rhythm was hypnotic, a meditation in motion, each scoop a small rebellion against the night's accumulation. I didn't notice her at first. She appeared silently, like a specter, her silhouette sharp against the dim light. The moment hung in the frigid air when I finally saw her, standing with arms crossed, the glow from the streetlight casting her in chiaroscuro. She seemed almost theatrical, a prophet of suburban order standing in judgment. The irony didn't escape me. Order, yet her gaze was chaos. I met her eyes, offering a nod, a silent gesture of greeting, or perhaps a truce. Her lips pursed, a line drawn tighter than the rules she cherished. A long, quiet moment stretched between us, a pause in which I half expected the world to fracture. Then she turned on her heel, the sharp clack of her boots echoing in the icy stillness. I watched her retreat, the snow absorbing her footsteps, erasing the evidence of her presence. A shred of hope flickered that perhaps this was the end, that the morning would reclaim its serenity. But peace, like the snow, is transient. It was the sirens that shattered the calm first, a shrill wail that cut through the tranquility like a jagged knife. I stood there, shovel in hand, as the police cruiser pulled into the street, its lights painting the snow in dizzying flashes of red and blue. The officers emerged, their breath visible in the cold, their expressions masked by the shadows. An emergency, they conveyed, a disturbance, a neighbor's concern for the sanctity of community rules disrupted. I sighed, the sound lost in the rising wind, a mirthless smile tugging at my lips. This was the landscape of our neighborhood, a topography of fragile peace and petty skirmishes where the quiet life was often nothing but an illusion. And so, in the dawn's early light, I welcomed the absurdity. The snow continued to fall, and I returned to my task, the shovel once more biting into the drift. Peace, I decided, was not found in the absence of conflict, but rather in the acceptance of its inevitability. The chill of morning had barely dissipated when the HOA newsletter landed in my mailbox. It carried the weight of Karen's latest vendetta like the herald of an approaching storm. I could almost feel her eyes watching from her window, the blinds a permanent smirk of superiority. She'd escalated her campaign, adding absurdity to her arsenal with the precision of someone who had turned spite into an art form. The newsletter was thick with new regulations, each more ludicrous than the last, clearly crafted in response to my supposed infractions. The snow removal schedule had been amended, now dictating exact hours for shoveling, complete with penalties for those who dared to challenge the decree. To preserve communal harmony, it read. Harmony. I could almost hear the word dripping from Karen's lips, sweetened with sarcasm. The pages rustled in my hands, echoing the whispers that had begun to drift through the neighborhood. Karen's stories were spreading, her version of events painting me as the villain in this suburban saga. Her tales were woven with just enough truth to be believable, sowing seeds of doubt among my neighbors. Each nod of agreement, each conspiratorial glance, was another thread in her web. I walked past carefully manicured lawns, the crisp lines and perfect symmetry suddenly feeling oppressive. The air was thick with unspoken judgments, each lawn a silent testament to conformity. Karen had found her allies, fellow purveyors of perfection who clung to her every word as if it were gospel. Their smiles were tight, their greetings clipped, as if politeness were a currency they could scarcely afford to squander. A citation appeared on my door, fluttering in the breeze like a white flag of surrender. "Violation of HOA guidelines," it proclaimed, the ink sharp and accusing. It listed infractions that felt as arbitrary as they were numerous. A bin left out for too long, a hedge trimmed into the wrong shape. Each accusation was a reminder of Karen's influence, her ability to twist the mundane into the criminal. Inside my home, I found solace in the quiet defiance of my own space. Here, each object was placed just so, not by regulation, but by choice. It was my sanctuary, a refuge from the chaos Karen sought to impose. The walls were thick with my resolve, a barrier against the judgment that threatened to seep in. Her power lay in the illusion of authority, her rules a mirage designed to intimidate. But I had seen the cracks in her facade, the moments where her desperation bled through. She thrived on control, and the chaos of individuality threatened that. I watched the sun dip below the horizon, casting long shadows across the neighborhood. In the growing darkness, I felt the resolve harden within me. Karen's reign thrived on fear and compliance, but I was neither fearful nor compliant. I was simply me. The stage was set for the next act, the players in place, each bound by the roles Karen had crafted. But I was not content to play the villain. The storm would come, as it always did, but I would not be swept away. I would stand firm against the tide of her tyranny. As the stars emerged, twinkling defiantly against the night, I knew that the battle had truly begun, and in the quiet, I could almost hear Karen's footsteps retreating, her confidence a little less unshakable than before. The dawn ushered in a cold, unwavering light that seemed to echo the chill in Karen's eyes as she stood at the edge of my driveway. The snow lay undisturbed now, an ironic white flag beneath the clear sky, mocking the early morning chaos her call had summoned. The 911 operator, finally convinced that my pre-dawn shoveling was not a matter of public urgency, had left Karen smoldering on her porch, her indignation as palpable as the frost in the air. I watched the remnants of the incident dissipate like mist, my resolve crystallizing with each quiet inhale. Documentation was key. I began collecting everything: emails, notices, even the curt notes she slipped beneath my door like a passive-aggressive Santa. Each piece of correspondence was a brushstroke in the portrait of her unyielding surveillance. The stack grew, each sheet a testament to a battle fought not with fists, but with words and rules bent to her will. Karen thrived in the HOA meetings, where she wielded her authority as though it were a scepter. I'd seen her reduce the strongest to stammering apologies over infractions as trivial as a trash can left out a moment too long. My intention was not to bring her to her knees, but to restore a sense of balance, a reminder that even the staunchest of monarchs must answer to their own edicts. I devised a subtle counter, quiet, unassuming, like the snowfall that had instigated her latest tirade. The HOA guidelines, an intricate web of do's and don'ts, were a double-edged sword, and Karen, for all her scrutiny, had overlooked a glaring omission. A clause regarding personal grievances, buried amidst the usual jargon, offered a recourse, a formal review process by an external mediator should a resident feel unduly harassed by a member. It was a small avenue, but one ripe with the potential for change. On paper, it was nothing more than a paragraph easily missed. In practice, it was an opportunity to gently illuminate her overreach, a quiet confrontation with her own reality. I prepared my case with the same meticulous care she devoted to monitoring our cul-de-sac. My evidence was stacked and ready, each item a step toward a resolution that embraced peace over conflict. The day of the scheduled review was unremarkable, the kind of day that slips by unnoticed unless you're searching for it. I arrived early, the conference room sterile in its formality, sunlight spilling across the table where we would sit. When Karen entered, her expression was a mask of polite surprise, a benign smile that faltered when she saw the documentation arrayed before me. It was not the confrontation she anticipated. There was no raised voice or accusatory finger, just a presentation of facts, a quiet accounting of her reign. She shifted uncomfortably, the silence between us heavy. The mediator, a neutral party, unbiased and unimpressed by her usual tactics, observed with a mild interest that seemed to unnerve her. As the discussion unfolded, I felt the tension in the room soften, the air around us clearing like a sky after a storm. Karen, for perhaps the first time, appeared unsure, a queen without her crown. My intention was never to dethrone, but to coexist, to remind her that power unchecked was a lonely dominion. In the end, the resolution was simple and fair. Karen was to curb her vigilance, to allow neighbors the grace of their own routines. The mediator's gentle suggestion was that she take some time to reflect, perhaps find a hobby less invasive than policing snowflakes. As we left the room, the world seemed lighter, the snow glinting in the sunlight like scattered diamonds. Karen paused at her porch, her expression unreadable. For a brief moment, our eyes met, and there was a flicker of something, understanding perhaps, or acceptance. I turned away, leaving her to the quiet contemplation of her realm. The snow had begun to fall again, and I watched it settle, a soft blanket over the neighborhood, peaceful, unrushed. The world had returned to silence after the police officers left, their boots crunching through the snow, leaving shallow graves of sound that quickly filled with the whisper of falling flakes. My breath curled like smoke into the chill, dissipating into the early morning air, a testament to the futility of human interference with nature's indifference. Karen had retreated to her fortress of order, a curtain twitching as her unyielding gaze followed my every move. The morning's absurdity lingered, a specter of bureaucracy gone awry. I turned my back to her house, letting the soft crunch of snow beneath my feet be the only conversation between us. The dawn was crawling over the horizon, a slow golden tide washing the slate sky clean. It was a new day, and I had plans. And, underneath the layers of winter wear, a quiet determination burned. I stepped back inside, shaking off the chill with a shiver that was as much defiance as reflex. The coffee pot gurgled, the warm aroma curling tendrils through the house, a small rebellion against the unwelcome intrusion of the morning's chaos. I had decided on a quiet revolution, one that unfolded in law libraries and courthouse hallways rather than snow-covered driveways. The HOA bylaws had been my bedtime reading for weeks, each page turned with the precision of a tactician, uncovering inconsistencies and oversteps like hidden treasures. Knowledge was my shovel now, and I was about to clear a path of my own design. The legal process is not swift. It moves with the ponderous inevitability of glaciers, carving landscapes over eons. I was prepared for the wait, knowing that patience is its own form of resistance. Karen's tangled web of petty rules and regulations would unravel, thread by thread, under the scrutiny of a legal microscope. As I gathered documents, a strange calm settled over me. There is power in preparation, in the meticulous gathering of facts and arguments. The mechanics of justice, though slow, are relentless once set in motion. Karen could peer from her window, her fortress of paper rules and ink regulations. But none of those would shield against the truth inching toward her. A few weeks later, a letter arrived. Official, embossed, and authoritative. It was time. The envelope was heavy in my hands, not with weight, but with the gravitas of the changes it heralded. I opened it slowly, savoring the anticipation. The words inside were a symphony of vindication, carefully composed notes of legal reasoning that resonated with my own intentions. One line stood out, simple yet profound. The HOA's enforcement of bylaws must adhere to reasonable standards. It was a gentle correction, an invitation for balance. It was the crack in Karen's porcelain empire. A few days later, the HOA meeting unfolded like a theater production, each member playing their part. Karen's facade of control slipped just a fraction as the letter was read. The room was silent, but charged, the air thick with the unsaid. Her smile was brittle, a mask over the realization that her reign had limits. No need for raised voices or public confrontations. The quiet resolve of the law spoke louder than words ever could. It was enough. As the meeting concluded, I caught a glimpse of Karen's eyes. There was a flicker, a recognition, perhaps, that authority unchecked can become its own downfall. I stepped outside, the cold air sharp and invigorating. The snow continued to fall, indifferent to human affairs. I took a deep breath, savoring the crispness of victory. It was only the beginning. But it was enough for today. The world felt a little wider, a little more just. And that was worth every shiver and every quiet battle fought with words on a page. The morning sun pooled lazily through the curtains, casting stripes of light across my living room floor. It was a welcome calm in contrast to the chaos of the past few days. The neighborhood had been buzzing ever since Karen's pre-dawn spectacle, her righteous indignation over my snow shoveling reaching its crescendo with a wail of sirens cutting through the dim silence of early morning. Life, I've learned, has an odd way of bringing balance to chaos. Karen had tipped the scales so drastically it seemed inevitable that things would eventually swing back. Her call to 911, an act of desperation wrapped in a cloak of control, only highlighted an unraveling. A community can't thrive on fear and pettiness. The neighborhood meeting was set for the evening. People moved in and out of the community center with the kind of hushed anticipation reserved for significant events. There was a shared understanding that this was more than a meeting. It was a reckoning. The room was filled with the smell of coffee and the faint, lingering scent of winter brought in on coats and boots. Faces were familiar, some resolute, others weary. I scanned the room, noting the absence of Karen's usual commanding presence. Instead, she was seated quietly off to the side, her eyes darting, calculating. Without her voice dominating the space, the air eased. Neighbors exchanged glances, silently aligning without the need for words. It was as if we all took a collective breath, exhaling the tension that had knotted us together in a shared, silent rebellion. When the meeting began, the room was electric. People spoke, their voices a harmony of grievances, frustrations, and desires for change. It wasn't a mutiny, but a movement, a shift in the collective consciousness. The quiet power of reasonable minds stood in stark contrast to Karen's discordant symphony of control. The irony wasn't lost on me. Her attempts to tighten her grip only highlighted her inability to hold on. In that room, under the dull glow of fluorescent lights, the fabric of our community was being rewoven. Stronger threads, bonded by mutual respect and understanding, began to weave through the fragile strands that Karen had so tightly wound. And then, like a scene out of a play where the protagonist is given their due moment, she spoke. Her voice, usually sharp and authoritative, now wavered, tinged with an unfamiliar humility. It was a moment of high tension, a pinnacle of drama as she conceded, acknowledging, not in words, but in posture, the necessity of change. Perhaps she finally felt the weight of isolation. Maybe the mirror of community reflection forced her to see herself anew. Whatever the reason, in that singular moment, the scales found their balance. As I left the meeting, the night air was crisp, biting, yet invigorating. It carried with it the sound of laughter, the warm hum of neighbors talking long after the meeting had ended. The streetlights cast a soft glow, illuminating the snow that had been shoveled so diligently off schedule, a silent testament to the quiet power of doing the right thing. Momentum had shifted. Karen had been sidelined, not as a villain vanquished, but as a player in a new game she had yet to understand. And as I walked home, boots crunching rhythmically against the salted sidewalk, I felt the stirring of something new, a community restored, bound not by rules but by the simple, profound act of coming together.